An inquest deals with the following matters: who the deceased was, and how, when, and where the deceased came by his death. I will not yet be dealing with the question of how, because at the present time there's an ongoing inquiry by the Director of Public Prosecutions as to whether the incident at Hillsborough discloses any criminal proceedings. You'll remember 6 months ago we were dealing with individuals, weren't we? We were taking each individual person and listening to medical evidence. What we were trying to do then was to deal with the first 3 points that coroners deal with: who died, when, and where. And now we're going to start thinking about how did they come by their deaths. I have listened, hopefully with attention. I'm going to take these inquests and deal with the question of how, on the basis of what happened up to 3:15 or thereabouts. I base it mainly on the medical evidence from several pathologists. On average, how many pints would you say people were knocking back?
They were coming up for lager, 5 pints at a time.
Individuals were?
Yeah, plus your Guinness or whatever.
Would you say that some of the people had had...
Quite enough, sir.
Fairly near the front, were you?
Yeah, fairly near the front, yeah. And,
Have a little drink of water. Sorry?
Could I have a break for a minute, please?
Sorry, I couldn't... Yes, by all means. Just leave us for a few minutes and settle yourself down. If people leave the court, I want them to leave quietly. That may well be so, but we are not exploring that aspect of the matter at the moment. This is definitely an incriminating question, and you should think hard before you answer. Can I take the opportunity of wishing all the legal representatives a very, very happy Christmas? And I will use the term prosperous New Year. It's appropriate for legal representatives, but I don't want to exclude anybody else. I know, particularly for the families, this is a very difficult time. But nevertheless, I want to wish you as happy a Christmas and as happy a New Year as you can possibly have. Would it have been recording before 1502?
Yes.
So there ought to be a film of it.
I would have thought so, yes.
If I were to tell you that we can't find it, would that make any difference to your answer? There are 3 possible conclusions which you are able to consider. The first is unlawfully killed. The second is accidental death, misadventure. The third one is open. The first one, unlawfully killed, you have to be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt. Are you likely to reach a verdict within the next hour or so?
No.
In that case, carry on until, say, 4:30, and then we'll convey you to a suitable location where I hope you'll have a reasonable evening. I want to ask you again a question I asked you yesterday afternoon. Are you likely to come to a verdict within, say, the next hour or so?
No.
Tomorrow, then? Shall we say, then, 9:30 tomorrow? Mr. Foreman, would you please stand? Have you reached a verdict on which you have all agreed?
No.
Have you reached a verdict on which at least 9 of you has agreed?
Yes.
Do you know what it is, or do you want to go out and fetch the forms?
We haven't got the forms, the actual verdict.
Okay. Tell me what wording you've decided to put into paragraph 3.
9-2 majority. Accidental death.
You say it was nothing unusual for your late wife to take her boat out at night entirely alone.
Not at all unusual. It was one of her great pleasures in life.
And she was an accomplished yachtswoman.
Very. She was accomplished at everything she did.
I was asking specifically about her ability in the handling of a sailing boat.
She was highly proficient.
Can it matter now? Stupid waste of time.
I would prefer no comment on the evidence given in my court.
What's your step, girl?
Sailing calls for caution in the judgment of weather conditions, doesn't it?
Of course.
Would you describe the late Mrs. De Winter as reckless?
Certainly not.
But she did have a reputation for welcoming danger.
What do you mean?
As a sportswoman, Mr. De Winter.
Yes, I suppose that's true. She was not a timid person.
Say that again.
Manners be...
A strong-willed woman, Mr. De Winter.
It's fair to say she knew her own mind.
You are James Tabb, boat builder, and you say you carried out the work of converting the late Mrs. De Winter's sailing yacht from its original construction as a fishing boat of French design. Is that correct?
It is, sir.
Was the boat in a fit state to put to sea?
She was, when I fitted her out in April last year. It was Mrs. De Winter's fourth season with her.
Had the boat ever been known to capsize before?
No, sir. And I'd as soon heard of it from Mrs. De Winter if it had.
I suppose great care would be needed to handle this small vessel in rough weather.
Well, she wasn't a cranky little craft like some. She was stout and seaworthy. Mrs. De Winter had sailed her in much worse weather than there was that night.
So did it surprise you that the boat was lost that night?
I couldn't understand it. I've said so all along.
She was lost. That's all there is to it.
But surely if Mrs. De Winter went below, probably for a coat, as is supposed, and a sudden gust of wind came down from the headland, that would be enough to capsize the boat.
No. No, not in my view.
Well, that seems to be what happened. No one's blaming your workmanship. I accept your statement that you delivered the boat in sound condition, which is all I wish to know from you. It seems Mrs. De Winter relaxed her watchfulness for a moment and lost her life. Such accidents have happened before in local waters.
Excuse me, sir. But there's a bit more to it than that.
Indeed. What, precisely?
After the boat was brought up, I got permission from the harbour master to examine her. What I want to know is, who drove the holes in her planking?
What's the fellow telling us now?
Are you saying deliberately done?
I am, sir. I'm saying the boat never capsized at all. She was scuttled.
What does the man think he's saying?
Mr. De Winter, do you know anything about those holes driven in the planking?
Nothing whatever.
It is a shock to you, of course.
It was a shock to find that I made a mistaken identification some 12 months ago. Now I find that my late wife not only drowned in her cabin, but that the boat was damaged with deliberate intent that it should sink. Does it surprise you that I am shocked?
Mr. De Winter, we all feel deeply for you, but I have to inquire into this matter and will do so. I don't do it for my own amusement.
That's quite obvious.
Oh, Maxim, don't lose your temper.
Do we agree that whoever took the boat out that night must have driven the holes in the planking?
So it appears.
It appears very strange, does it not?
Certainly.
You have no suggestion to offer?
None at all.
Mr. De Winter, painful as it may be, it is my duty to ask you a very personal question.
Very well.
Were relations between you and the late Rebecca De Winter perfectly happy?
That's disgraceful.